This is the MBA Wire, episode 23. If I were to be an actress, which actress would I be? Jeez. These tough questions. Nicole Kidman. Yeah.
Inspirational MBA talk with successful alumni to motivate you during your application run. We go behind the scenes of every story, talk business, and show you why it's worthwhile to never give up on your MBA dream. And now, here's your host with the most, Mateo Chang.
All right, folks. I've got a different interview style for all of you. So I recorded this during our HEC conference 2015 in Europe. So excuse the background noise, but there was a lot going on. But I kind of liked it. It gives off a sort of a live feeling to it. Nah? Well, anyway, check it out. 5 questions, 3 current students, and a lot of great insights for your MBA journey. First up is Chris McEvoy. Let's hear what he has to say. All right, what's happening, listeners of the MBA Wire? Welcome. We are here in beautiful Paris at our 2015 HEC conference. I'm here sitting down at HEC with Christopher McEvoy. Prefers to be called Chris. He's a current student right now. And why don't you tell us, to our listeners, a little bit about yourself and your background and how you came to HEC.
Sure. Hello, everyone out there, and thanks for having me. So as you might be able to tell by my accent, I'm an Australian. So like many people, for me, the MBA was a catalyst for change. I've been working in the wealth management, private banking industry for 8 years. I wanted to get out of Australia, and there weren't opportunities to do that with work. But I also wanted to change my job function, and I wanted to get into management. So for me, the MBA was a platform to launch both a change of geography, but also a change of function as well. So I've been here for 6 months now. I'm 6 months into the course, and glad to say that it's met my expectations on every front. So in terms of the quality of peers, professors, and the course structure and material, it's been a great experience. So that's where we are now.
A lot of our students right now who are listening are going through the application process, which is a long and arduous journey. What kind of difficulties did you face during your application? I mean, you applied while you were in Australia, right? So what kind of difficulties do people down there have with the application process, especially for a school like in Europe?
So firstly, I guess it's probably important to understand why I chose Europe. So for me, I was looking for a school that had some ties back into Asia Pacific, and I found the European schools had in terms of diversity of their class, they had a pretty big representation of people from all parts of the world, including Asia Pacific. As with respect to the challenge of the application, I empathise with everyone who's going through it at the moment. It's a big time investment, particularly if you're still working while you're doing it. The most difficult part for me, I think, was GMAT, and not just doing GMAT, but struggling with, I think, putting a lot of time into preparation and having good practice results, and then in the first time around I had a really disappointing experience and grade, and dealing with that disappointment was the biggest challenge. But I would strongly encourage everyone to persevere, and that was the feedback I had from HEC and some other schools who liked my profile, but I knew I needed to get a better score, and I'm glad that I did, because like a lot of people, the second time was a much better experience, and well, yeah, here I am.
So now that you went past that GMAT difficulty, which I think most of our students face, once you were accepted into HEC, and now that you're a current student, you've been, what are some of the greatest highlights? What are some greatest moments while you were here?
That's a good question, because there are many. But I think the thing I love about the school here Obviously, at every MBA, you meet a lot of interesting people and you make some great lifelong friends. But there are some unique experiences here. So the one that comes to mind for me is our MBA tournament. So we're running a student-run sporting tournament, which goes for 3 days every May each year. So it's the 25th anniversary this year. So it's a big one for us. So there's a team of kind of 15 people charged with organising this whole event. So from logistics to catering and planning parties, that's actually my role, is in charge of events. So it's a $500,000 budget. We're a large team. We have to delegate and manage people and relationships, time conflicts. I mean, it's a real life experience, but within the campus environment. So for me, for someone who wanted to get into management and get more hands-on management experience, this is something not only that I've genuinely learned from, but it's something I can use on my resume and talking to companies as well. So that's probably so far the highlight of the experience for me.
Nice. Now I know HEC also focuses a lot on leadership development, right? Can you tell me a little bit of how that has been changing you, both professionally and personally, as far as the activities that you are taking as a leader?
Sure. So I think the first instance is there's a lot of group work, and that asks quite a lot of you in terms of juggling different professional backgrounds, different cultures, different ethical principles when you're doing casework, and that in turn that brings out, I think, leadership qualities. There are also specific opportunities such as the MBA tournament team I've spoken about. I'm also involved with a group called TEC, or the Executive Committee, which is a small group of 12 students who have one-on-one and peer-to-peer and group mentoring sessions with CEOs and a consulting individual. So that is focused on developing leadership qualities and how to manage life as a business manager, owner, leader. So I think that's a specific example. And then obviously, there's some sporting and industry groups as well. So I'm vice president of a finance club, currently organising a trek to Asia Pacific, to Singapore and Hong Kong in a couple of weeks. So again, organising people, a schedule for our time there and juggling priorities. I think, as any leader, the idea is to motivate and inspire people to be better than the status quo. So I think there's a lot of opportunities to do that here.
Wow, that's very amazing. I mean, you're engaged in so many different activities, and it's obviously developing you as a strong leader for future markets. And I really want to just thank you for your time, for taking the time off and having this short interview and helping our students, our listeners here push through that difficult moment. Why don't you give us a final piece of advice for our closing statement, and then we'll just finish our interview with that.
I'd like to take that opportunity because for everyone out there who's going through that application process at the moment, I know it is very intensive and asks a lot of you in terms of your patience, your time, ultimately your money as well. But I guarantee you it is absolutely worth the investment, and it's a life-changing experience. And I would strongly encourage everyone who's amidst that process to persevere, get through that, because the hardest part actually is applying. And once you get in, it's just about enjoying it and growing as a person. So all the best.
Awesome. Persevere is the key word here, guys. And that's it for our live interview here at the AGAC 2015 conference at HEC Paris. Next, we have Meaghan Kappel. All right, what's going on, listeners of the MBA Wire? This is your host again, Mateo Chang. I am at the 2015 AGAC conference live, interviewing current students here at HEC Paris. Beautiful country, by the way. Right now we have Meaghan Kappel, president of the MBA Student Council. Meaghan, thank you so much for giving us your time, especially during this exam season, right? You guys are all busy studying. Thank you so much for taking a few minutes of your time for this interview. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. Thank you so much again for the invitation. First off, a little bit about me. I am a Canadian. From Toronto, Canada, and I've been at HEC Paris since September 2014, and I'm graduating in December 2015, so the end of this year. A little bit about me. Academically, my undergrad is actually in biopsychology. I studied research science and decided not to pursue that path, and instead I moved to Prague in the Czech Republic after graduating and worked at an international news syndicate there for 3.5 years. That was my first foray into media. Absolutely loved it. Moved back to Toronto, did a little bit of work in public relations and sales, and most recently was working at a digital media startup in Toronto. So really exciting place. I was there for just over 2 years and I decided to make the move, make the switch, and come to HEC to pursue my MBA.
All right, very nice, very nice. Now, can you? Most of our listeners here are going through their application phase right now, and many of them are facing difficulties. And as with all students who have ever applied to an MBA, now, what kind of difficulties did you face, and how did you get over them?
That's a big question, and I've had to think a little bit about what my answer would be, because it's easy now that I'm here in the program to sort of forget what those difficulties were, but it definitely was, for me at the time, the biggest difficulty I would say was really trying to understand the differences between the programs. I think that was one of the hardest things that I had a hard time wrapping my head around in the research phase. What are the really key differences between these top schools that I was looking at and applying to? Personally, I had a lot of big questions around how this would affect my life. I'm actually married, so I left my husband back in Toronto to pursue my MBA. So that was a big personal question and difficulty that I had to go through as far as having those conversations. And as far as the actual application, I would say the difficulty there was really just finding the time, working full time and having to find the time to study for the GMAT, do the GMAT, get the references together, get good quality references together, start to sort of spread the news in my network to get some feedback, to get some constructive criticism, start to really think through my essays and what I was going to actually put in those essays. It had been a while since I had to talk about myself and write about myself in that way. So it was a really reflective period. And I think for me, it ultimately just came down to really the balance of everything. So how do you do it when you're working full time? And my fondest memory looking back now, I realize, is being in a hotel, hours before the deadline for HEC Paris, having just spent like a 12-hour day with client and just having to make sure I make that deadline. Is everything in order? Have I clicked send? Is it all official? So it certainly was really up and down during the application period, and certainly some difficulties that I'm sure I'm not alone in having them.
Yeah, some may call that an adrenaline rush, and others may call it an anxiety attack. That specific situation where you're hours before a deadline, and it really depends on your point of view. But that's amazing. That's amazing how that's one of your fondest memories of the hardships that you went through in the application. That's awesome. So now that you've been through that, could you tell our listeners what are some of the highlights? What are some of the amazing things that are going on since you've been in this MBA? I mean, we all talk about how it's worth going through the hardships because an MBA is so amazing. Why don't you give us an illustration about how amazing that is?
So I guess I'll kind of split that up into two things. I would say both on the social side and on the academic / professional side. So on the social side, biggest highlight I think was just simply being a student again. Coming back to school at the age of 29, having been out of it for 7-8 years at that point, and living on campus, living in residence, all of a sudden being in a room, in a classroom, being in a residence with 130 other people that you've just met that are from all over the world. In our class alone, we're about 50 different nationalities, so truly international. You have a common language. We speak English here, but that's about it. All of you have different experiences. All of you have come from different places, different professional experiences, personal experiences, and you're just that to me was the biggest high, and that still remains one of the biggest highlights, was the first couple of weeks at orientation, getting to know each other, the icebreakers that we did improv workshops, we did presentation skills, CV workshops, just a great opportunity to get to know each other. So that alone was a highlight, and that has led to, of course, all the amazing friendships I have now, and what I know will ultimately be a network of people that I can rely on in the future to reach out to if I'm traveling to Brazil, call up my friend Jean, who's going to live there. If I'm traveling to Singapore to meet with a client, I'm going to call up my friend Banu and say, let's grab coffee, let's talk. And I know that it's going to be lifelong friendships, but also lifelong career opportunities. And just that network is what drives me, I think, to this day and keeps me going. And then I would just say a couple other highlights have certainly been around the leadership experiences that I've had and the way the school has really helped me to push myself to my limits a little bit, get me out of my comfort zone. And one example of that I can think of recently was just this past weekend, I participated in the IBM Watson case competition. Totally out of my comfort zone in a way. It was very technical. I was up against a bunch of engineers, and our team out of the 11 teams won the competition, and that was just a complete high. So it felt pretty good. So just a few highlights. I'm sure there are many more I could think of, but those stand out as being some pretty awesome memories.
Wow, and the memories will just continue on building up. I mean, you're a current student, so you still have, more things to come, right? Well, HEC is considered #1 elite business school in Europe, right? And you guys have this great push on leadership and leadership development. And I find that to be very, very interesting. Could you tell us a little bit about this leadership development?
Absolutely. So leadership here is central to so much of the student experience. And I would say we're really fortunate as a school because we're so small and it's so intimate. By small, I mean sheer size of students and the intakes that we have. There's really an opportunity for almost everybody to take a leadership role. A couple ways of doing that are through the Student Council. And I believe you mentioned I am the current president-elect of the MBA Student Council, and I lead a team of 16 students in a variety of roles, and that's been a great challenge, by far, probably the biggest leadership challenge I've had here. But if it's not being a part of the council, we also have about 15 clubs, so anything from the consulting club, the finance club, business analytics club, all the way down to the women in leadership club, which I'm also a part of. And the roles are diverse. It can be that you're heading up events, it can be that you're acting as a treasurer, that you're acting as a president or a VP. So you're really able to drive the agenda of a club or a council and see your vision through during your 6-month term, basically. So that's been absolutely fantastic. And I think most people would rate that quite highly on their experience. Insofar as it does just allow you to test your own comfort zone, like I said, your own boundaries, it's sort of a safe space to do that before you go back into the working world. The second thing I would add, something that's quite unique to HEC, is our military boot camp, I call it, that we do, and it's actually coming up a couple weeks from now. It's going to be in April, and that's at Saint-Cyr in France, which is basically the military base camp where they train their soldiers. HEC has a tradition of having former military coming in as students in the MBA program. So I'm actually, one of my colleagues, Charles, led a team in Afghanistan. And we're going to have the opportunity to go there for a weekend and have an intense 3-day experience with fellow students. And challenges are things like you have a rope, you have a team of 5 people, and you need to cross the river. How do you do that? And I've heard it's absolutely intense and amazing, and it's going to push everybody to their limits. And I think, again, that's really something unique that HEC has to offer compared to other schools.
Wow, that's intense and that's amazing at the same time. I mean, how real world can you get? I mean, for leadership development, hey, let's go to business school, but first we're going to build a bridge over at Afghanistan. So, yeah, I mean, that's exciting. That sounds so exciting and, just very unique, very unique. Meaghan, I just want to thank you so much for giving us your time here, telling us about your experience. And we're just going to wrap up our interview now with one final piece of advice you would give our students who are going through the application phase.
One final piece of advice. I think my final piece of advice is things often seem 10 times harder in the moment than they really are. And that's whether it's during the applications, that's now that I'm in the MBA program, every step you kind of take, you have to realize, I'm going to get through this. It seems really hard right now, But I know tomorrow, looking back, it's going to be fine. I will get through this, and it's just one part of the journey. So that would be my final piece of advice. Thank you.
Thank you, Meaghan. Wow, that was fantastic. That was amazing. Thank you very much. All right, there you have it, listeners of the MBA Wire, live here at the 2015 AGAT conference. I'm signing off from HEC Paris. And last but not least, here's Ryan Howard's take on my 5 questions. Enjoy. What's going on, citizens of The Wire? I cannot tell you how excited I am to have with us sitting here Ryan Howard here at HEC Paris. Ryan, why don't you go ahead and tell our listeners a little bit about yourself?
Hello, friends. I'm Ryan Howard from Canada. I am an engineer. I started in biomedical engineering and ended up in oil and gas, of all things. So I'm from Calgary, Alberta, which is on the west coast or west side of Canada, kind of by the Rocky Mountains. And it's more or less the Texas of Canada. So I've been working in oil and gas for 8 to 9 years before my MBA. So the MBA has been a long time coming. I was involved in international exploration, was really enjoying it, and wanted to keep going, work abroad. I'm Irish as well, so I've been looking at basing out of Europe for a long time, and the MBA seemed like the perfect way to do it. So I've been at HEC here in Paris since September, and it's been going great. Been having a great time.
All right, fantastic. Thank you for that introduction, Ryan. Ryan, our listeners here are mostly students who are going through the tough application process for their MBA of choice. Now, you've been through that hurdle. What were your difficulties, your personal difficulties during the application process, and how did you overcome them?
Yeah, I think as everyone knows, I don't need to remind them it's not the funnest process in the world. If you want to go dancing, you got to pay the band. And I frankly found that almost the toughest thing of business school so far was just the work that you have to put in, the horrible GMAT. Well, it's not that horrible in the end, but the whole process is tough. There's no way around it. You got to work, and a lot of it is time management. So for me, I was working. My company, I'm actually on leave from back in Canada, and they were great about it. But at the time, I was kind of sneaking around, not really sure if I was going to pull the trigger on going into an MBA. So I didn't want to, tell my boss and then back out. So I was doing all this kind of with my door closed over lunch, trying to study the GMAT. So that was definitely a challenge. You've got to put in the work. There's no way around it. I think, a podcast like this is fantastic because I think a lot of people find themselves in kind of a drought of knowledge. You have all these questions, you have, all these schools, all the what's going to get me in, where do I want to go, all this sort of stuff. So, the more that you can talk to people about it, the better. I found just hearing about people's experience really kind of cast some light on it, because at the end of the day, it's not, you don't have to split atoms to get in. If you put in your time, you get a good GMAT score. You write honest essays about yourself. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised at how you'll be received. I've been just super impressed with the caliber of people I've been going to school here at HEC with, and it's something you gotta get done.
It's got to be done. It's got to be done. And once it's done, once you've entered your school of choice, there's always the good moments, the highlights that come. What, in your opinion, Ryan, here at HEC Paris, have been the highlights of your MBA experience so far?
Yeah, definitely. It feels good after, putting in all that work to get in and do the applications and everything. Once you're in and you're here, you feel pretty proud, no doubt about it. I always looked at the MBA as kind of a finishing school for engineers, for me anyways. So I've been just super impressed with that. It's been great in terms of everything I wanted to get out of it. I have, I'm here in France. That's been fantastic. The people are just so interesting in terms of diversity, in terms of where they're from, what they've done, the companies they've worked at. you go to these courses that are just so well organized. The profs are slick. They are professional. They have resources. If there's anything you don't understand, you talk to them. You go on their websites. It's pretty incredible. And you're in a class with people who, I mean, any person in the class could teach you a class on something. So, you know, being able to take these really effective, interesting classes, and then afterwards you're with, in my case, 140 of my friends, and we can talk about absolutely anything. They're interested in what you've done. You're interested in what they've done. That's been pretty fantastic. And also just the exposure. I mean, you're here. I'm here in Europe. I'm talking to companies all over the place. You know, we just did a trip to Oslo, Norway with our energy club. We've got consulting firms and companies welcoming us in, wanting to hear about us, about what we've done. So it's been a great experience so far.
Oh, that sounds fantastic. Not only just the networking and the exposure, but just the overall experience. Now, I know that HEC focuses a lot on leadership development. Can you tell us about this leadership development and how it's been changing you?
Yeah, definitely. And it's interesting. Like our dean, Bernard Garrett, just wrote an interesting article. I can't remember where it was online, but kind of focusing on that and what is leadership, how that term has been used and misused, how it applies to MBA programs. So in our case, it's really kind of a decentralized approach. It's a lot of critical thinking, a lot of focus on dealing with teams, dealing with people, understanding where people are coming from, how can you get groups to work as well as possible. So it's definitely not the traditional old school push idea of leadership and power. It's a lot of analyzing a situation and making the best decisions for how to make things work. Sometimes the best thing you can do as a leader is to completely back off. So it's really interesting, challenging your beliefs on that and being in groups where you have to think this out and frankly being able to make mistakes. I mean, you get in these situations where you're doing management simulation or something like that, and you can totally screw it up and learn from it. And that's fantastic. I'd much rather be able to have the luxury to do that here than out in the real world. So it's pretty fantastic to have an opportunity to feel your way around in that respect.
Awesome. All right. Well, Ryan, I just want to thank you so much for giving us a few minutes of your time for this interview. As we wrap up, why don't you give our listeners just a final piece of advice?
Definitely. I'm just having flashbacks to when I was in your situation here. It's kind of funny to think about. One piece of advice: take it easy. It can be kind of stressful going through all this. There's a lot of uncertainty. I find that things work out, especially with choosing schools. I mean, you're all probably looking at some pretty good schools, and I've been incredibly impressed here at HEC. I have nothing but good things to say about the school, but there's a lot of good schools out there. There's a lot of good programs. You're going to meet a lot of good people. So, be honest with yourself. Be honest about what you want. There's, you can go look at rankings all day long, but at the end of the day, there's a school that's going to be right for you, right for where you're at in your career, right for what you want. And boy, does it feel good when you figure that out and get there. So, enjoy the process, and it's a great thing to do. Good luck to everyone.
Wow, that's some very, very amazing insights. I'm getting the chills here just after interviewing three of HEC students, and you guys are each giving me a different point of view. I think that's amazing. I know that's great. Ryan, thank you so much again. On behalf of the MBA Wire, we are signing off.
Thanks for tuning into the MBA Wire. Would you like to know more? Visit us online at thembawire.com today and leave your questions and feedback. While you're there, sign up for an exclusive free audio series to help you strengthen your MBA interview. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time on the MBA Wire.